Life is a brutal, complicated business, and every so often, certain individuals, through no grand design of their own, become something far more significant than they realize. They become a signal, a warning, a manifestation of truth itself. Now, today we're going to talk about something profoundly unsettling, but absolutely necessary to confront. The idea that you, yes, you, might be God's last warning to the narcissist. Not merely an obstacle in their path, not just another figure to manipulate or discard, but a divine final mirror held up to their soul, exposing what they refuse to see. There are signs, undeniable, powerful, that suggest when this is happening. And understanding these signs could mean the difference between redemption and irreversible ruin. So let's walk through this carefully. Because the weight of it matters more than you might ever know. There's something fascinating, almost terrifying about the way certain individuals reveal themselves when confronted with genuine, unfiltered truth. Not the truth spoken in words necessarily, but the truth embodied in a person, in how they carry themselves, in what they refuse to tolerate, in the standards they uphold without even needing to explain them. When you encounter a narcissist, often you're dealing with someone who has spent years, if not decades, carefully constructing a fragile, elaborate identity. It's an identity designed to protect them from their own overwhelming sense of inadequacy, of unworthiness, feelings they cannot and will not consciously acknowledge. Instead, they bury those insecurities under layers of arrogance, charm, manipulation, and control. Their very survival, psychologically speaking, depends on maintaining that illusion, both to themselves and to the people around them. When you come into their life, you disrupt that system in ways you don't even realize. Simply by being yourself, by being honest where they are deceptive, humble where they are grandiose, courageous where they are fearful, you shine a light into places they've spent their whole life hiding from. You don't have to say anything accusatory. You don't have to point a finger or make grand declarations. Your existence, your character becomes an indictment. It forces a confrontation they cannot endure, because to face it would be to tear down the scaffolding that holds their entire false self together. This triggering effect is subtle at first. You might notice irritation, veiled criticism, small acts of sabotage or passive aggression. They will blame you for making them feel less than, although you did nothing of the sort. They will accuse you of arrogance or insensitivity because deep down, your presence stirs a terrifying awareness that they are living a lie. It's important to understand, narcissists are not merely confident people who occasionally boast. They are fundamentally fractured individuals whose entire identity is a desperate, ongoing act of denial. When you show up with authenticity, even quietly, it acts like acid on the brittle mask they wear. It corrodes the falsehood they cling to. What's remarkable is that you don't have to engage in battle with them for this to happen. You don't have to wage some grand crusade to expose them. It's your refusal to shrink, to participate in the fiction, to compromise your own soul for the sake of their comfort, that destabilizes them. They start feeling exposed even when no one else notices anything unusual. They grow increasingly anxious around you, increasingly irritable. They may lash out, ghost you, belittle you, attempt to guilt trip you. In their mind, the problem isn't their internal collapse, the problem is you, because acknowledging anything else would be a death sentence to their false self. At some point, you become a symbol of everything they are not but wish they could be. That's when the real breakdown begins. They can no longer pretend without feeling the crushing weight of what they have denied. They are faced with a terrible decision: either confront the abyss within themselves and begin the painful process of transformation, or double down on the deception, blaming and destroying everything that threatens to reveal it. Most, tragically, choose the latter. Your role in such a moment is not to fix them. It's not even to warn them directly, because often they cannot hear it and they certainly don't want to. Your role is simply to stand firm, to embody what is real, what is true, and what is good, regardless of how uncomfortable it makes them. In doing so, you serve as a mirror they cannot escape, and a warning they cannot ignore, even if they pretend otherwise. Whether they heed the warning is not within your control. There are few things more destabilizing to a narcissist than being in the presence of someone whose very existence challenges the lies they've built their identity around. See, a narcissist doesn't just tell lies to others, they tell them to themselves first. Their whole psychological survival mechanism is based on the belief that the false version of themselves they've created is real, that they are better, smarter, stronger, more important than they actually are. It's not simple arrogance. It's a defense against the unbearable thought that they might be deeply flawed, inadequate, or even unlovable. The lies aren't occasional, they are systemic. They touch every interaction, every relationship, every internal narrative. When you enter the scene, grounded in reality, unwilling to pretend, unwilling to play by the rules of their illusion, you create a pressure they are fundamentally unequipped to handle. You represent a standard they cannot meet without tearing themselves apart. You stand in silent contrast to the falsehoods they cling to, and by merely being there, by merely existing as you are, you force them to see the cracks in their own reflection. It's not that you call them out directly, though that might happen eventually. It's that your authenticity, your refusal to be manipulated or charmed or cowed, lays bare the emptiness at the core of their identity. At first, they will try to pull you into the illusion. They will attempt to reshape you into a participant in their fantasy, praising you when you comply, punishing you when you resist. But when they realize that you cannot be easily swayed, when they understand that you are not going to willingly reinforce their delusions, the game changes. You become a threat, not because you attack them, but because you reveal them. And that is intolerable to someone who has built their very life around avoiding exactly that confrontation. They will grow restless around you, defensive, sometimes even paranoid. They'll accuse you of misunderstanding them, of being judgmental, of thinking you're better, anything to shift the focus away from the uncomfortable fact that deep down they know they are lying to themselves. Every interaction with you becomes for them a small war against reality itself. And make no mistake, they will fight it with every tool they have: anger, guilt, charm, victimhood, whatever will allow them to preserve the facade a little longer. What's crucial to understand is that you are not their enemy, you are their mirror, a mirror that refuses to distort the image to make them feel better. And facing that mirror demands a level of courage and humility most narcissists do not possess. They would rather destroy the mirror than see themselves as they truly are. And that's why so often they turn vindictive. That's why the relationship, whatever form it takes, friendship, romantic, professional, becomes a battlefield of confusion and emotional manipulation. It's not just about controlling you, it's about protecting themselves from the annihilating reality that they are not who they claim to be. This process is exhausting, not just for them, but for you as well. It's a heavy burden to carry, being the unwilling catalyst for someone else's existential crisis. Many people, sensing the rising hostility, back down, placate, minimize themselves just to restore peace. But if you are God's warning to the narcissist, if you are the last opportunity for them to see and change, then your task is not to make them comfortable. It is to hold fast to the truth, to refuse to dim your light to protect their darkness, because sometimes the only thing powerful enough to crack the walls of self-deception is an encounter with something or someone that will not be moved. Control is the lifeblood of the narcissist. Every interaction, every relationship, every environment they inhabit is, in their mind, a system to be bent to their will. Control isn't just preferred, it's necessary. It's the mechanism by which they maintain the illusion of superiority, of dominance, of being untouchable. But when you step into their life as a person grounded in truth, their ability to control begins to erode, not through direct confrontation necessarily, but through the slow, inevitable friction that occurs when manipulation meets immovable integrity. Initially, they may not even realize it's happening. They'll use the same tactics that have worked countless times before: charm, flattery, guilt, intimidation, confusion, and expect the usual results. They'll try to pull you into their emotional games, test your loyalty through subtle betrayals, twist conversations to their advantage. But something about you is different. You don't react the way others have. You don't collapse into confusion. You don't compromise your sense of reality to preserve the peace. You don't give them the emotional payoff they depend on to feel powerful. Slowly, the threads they have always used to tie people to them start to slip through their fingers. This loss of control terrifies them more than almost anything else. Because at the core of a narcissist is not strength, but profound fragility. Their outward bravado masks an internal chaos that they have spent a lifetime trying to keep hidden, and control is the wall that keeps that chaos at bay. When you don't respond the way they need you to, when their strategies fall flat, that wall begins to crack. You may notice them becoming more desperate, more erratic. Their manipulation tactics will escalate. They may swing wildly between idealizing you and devaluing you, between sweet promises and vicious accusations. They will try every trick they know to pull you back under their influence. But often it only makes things worse for them, because once you've seen behind the mask, you can't unsee it. Once the spell is broken, their power diminishes significantly. The lies become more obvious, the gaslighting more transparent, the emotional games more pathetic. And every failed attempt to control you reinforces their own powerlessness, exposing them not just to you, but to themselves in ways they can no longer deny. They start to panic, though they will rarely show it openly. Instead, it leaks out through anger, bitterness, increasingly reckless behavior. They might lash out publicly, sabotaging their own image in ways that seem bewildering to outside observers, but make perfect sense when you realize the foundation of their control is disintegrating. What's happening is not simply the loss of influence over one person. It's the collapse of a worldview where they are always in charge, always one step ahead, always able to bend reality to their needs. Your refusal to be manipulated is more than personal resistance. It's existential defiance. It calls into question the entire system they've built around themselves. And the more they realize they cannot control you, the more they spiral, because control was never about power for its own sake. It was about survival. In this moment, you become a living contradiction to everything they have taught themselves to believe. You prove by your very existence that there are people who cannot be bought, bullied, or broken. The truth is not subjective, that integrity has weight, and perhaps most terrifying of all, you remind them, even if only subconsciously, that if they cannot control you, they may not be able to control anything at all. And for the narcissist, that realization is a kind of death, the end of the delusion that has sustained them for so long. The mask the narcissist wears is not optional. It is a meticulously constructed survival mechanism crafted over years of trial and error, designed to project strength, charm, and superiority while concealing profound internal emptiness. It works because they are usually experts at maintaining it. They know how to read a room, how to tell people what they want to hear, how to mirror back the desires and insecurities of others to make themselves indispensable. They thrive on the approval and admiration that their mask earns them, and they are often astonishingly good at keeping it intact, at least for a while. But when someone enters their life who refuses to participate in the illusion, the structure begins to strain. At first, the cracks are small, almost invisible. They might become short-tempered over minor criticisms or unusually defensive about harmless comments. These are the early warning signs, often dismissed by those around them who have grown accustomed to the performance. But as the narcissist's need for control intensifies and their usual strategies fail, the mask starts to slip, and not just in private. It starts to crumble in full view of the people whose admiration they so desperately crave. You might notice sudden, disproportionate reactions to trivial setbacks, a rage that seems wildly out of step with the situation. You might see them undermine or humiliate someone in public when they feel their image is threatened. You might hear them contradict themselves blatantly, twisting narratives to serve whatever version of reality they find most convenient in the moment. The facade of calm, collected superiority gives way to something far uglier, a fragile, desperate person scrambling to regain a grip on a reality they can no longer control. The people who once admired them start to notice, even if they can't immediately articulate it. They sense the dissonance between the image and the reality. They begin to question, to pull back. Relationships that were once effortless for the narcissist to manage start becoming complicated. Loyalty begins to fray. Trust begins to erode. And because the narcissist is fundamentally incapable of accepting responsibility, they react not with humility or self-reflection, but with greater desperation, more extreme manipulation, more overt cruelty. They double down on the mask even as it collapses around them. This public unmasking is devastating for the narcissist because it attacks the very foundation of their self-worth, external validation. They are not rooted internally. Their entire sense of identity depends on how others see them. When others begin to see through them, it feels like annihilation. It feels like death. And often, instead of facing the reality and doing the brutal, necessary work of inner transformation, they lash out. They blame, they deflect, they create new narratives, playing the victim, accusing others of betrayal, injustice, cruelty, anything to explain why their once flawless image has started to decay. But the deeper truth is inescapable. The decay comes from within. It was always there, hidden under the surface, sustained only by the illusions they could maintain. And when you, by your refusal to be controlled, by your quiet insistence on truth, enter the picture, you become the catalyst that accelerates the collapse. Your presence acts like a solvent, breaking down the fragile glue that holds the mask together, not through violence, not through accusation, simply through truth. The quiet, immovable truth that reveals lies for what they are, without needing to scream or threaten. This is why your role is so critical and why it carries so much weight. Because when the narcissist mask starts slipping in front of everyone, it's not just about a loss of reputation. It's a moment of potential reckoning, a rare opportunity where change is possible, but only if they choose to confront what has been exposed. Most will not. Most will retreat further into delusion, building even more elaborate lies to explain away the collapse. But some, a rare few, might finally see themselves clearly and understand, perhaps for the first time, just how much they have lost. One of the most profound sources of agony for the narcissist is the silent, unspoken recognition that they are fundamentally incapable of embodying the virtues they admire or pretend to admire in others. They may imitate confidence, but it's hollow. They may display intelligence, but it's often superficial. They may speak of morality, compassion, authenticity, but these are performances, carefully calibrated for approval, not genuine expressions of character. Deep down, whether they are willing to admit it or not, they know there is a standard of realness, of truth, of integrity that they cannot meet. And when you come into their life, living out those standards without pretense or performance, you become an unbearable reminder of that failure. Your strength doesn't come from domination, it comes from discipline. Your confidence isn't a show, it's rooted in humility and self-acknowledge. Your goodness isn't a tool to manipulate others, it flows naturally from who you are. And to the narcissist, this is intolerable because no matter how much they deceive others and themselves, your existence exposes the profound gap between who they are and who they wish they could be. It's not just that you are good at something they value. It's that you embody a level of moral and emotional development they have long since abandoned the hope of reaching. At first, they will attempt to diminish you, they'll minimize your achievements, mock your values, find flaws to pick apart, anything to reduce the cognitive dissonance they experience in your presence. Because if they can convince themselves and others that you are not as great as you seem, they can soothe the deep-seated shame they carry inside. But it doesn't work. Not really, because the truth has a gravity to it that performance can never replicate. No matter how they twist the story, no matter how they rationalize, they feel it when they are around you. The silent but devastating comparison between the life you are living and the empty act they are maintaining. This realization breeds resentment, envy, sometimes even hatred. But under all of that is grief. A grief so profound that acknowledging it would shatter their carefully maintained illusions. They are not angry merely because you make them look small. They are angry because you remind them of what they lost, or perhaps what they never had the courage to become. And because they cannot face that pain directly, they project it outward, turning you into the enemy, the problem, the one who thinks they're better. What's tragic is that you do not set yourself up as a standard to shame them. You simply live in alignment with what is true. But in the mind of the narcissist, your integrity becomes a constant, aching accusation. It reminds them of the standards they once knew were good and right, but abandoned in favor of easier victories, manipulation over hard-earned respect, performance over true character, control over genuine connection. The longer you remain in their life, the more difficult it becomes for them to maintain the charade. Every encounter with you chips away at the false self they are desperately trying to preserve. And the most painful part for them is the knowledge, often suppressed, often denied, that they could have made different choices. They could have chosen truth. They could have chosen humility, growth, sacrifice, but they didn't. And now, faced with someone who has walked a different path, they are forced to see the cost of those choices in stark, undeniable clarity. That's a confrontation most will not willingly accept. They will blame, they will rage, they will flee, anything but sit in the agonizing awareness of what they have become and what they might have been. The narcissist survives by tethering themselves to others, not in love, not in mutual respect, but in parasitic dependence. They feed off admiration, validation, control, and emotional chaos. As long as they can keep someone entangled in their web, they maintain the illusion of dominance, of being wanted, needed, superior. But when you, the one they could not fully control, could not fully deceive, finally walk away, something irreversible begins to unfold. Your departure is not just the loss of a supply source. It is the removal of the one stabilizing influence that kept their illusion intact. At first, they may not realize it. Their pride will not allow them to. They will frame your leaving as a betrayal, a childish tantrum, a sign of your weakness or ingratitude. They will tell themselves, and anyone who will listen, that they are better off without you, that you were the problem all along. But beneath the bravado is a growing dread, because your absence forces them into direct contact with the very emptiness they have spent a lifetime running from. Without someone strong and principled to reflect a better version of themselves, they are left staring into a mirror that shows only the hollow reality they have tried so hard to deny. Their usual methods no longer bring the same satisfaction. Manipulating new people feels emptier, more desperate. Winning admiration feels more fleeting, more hollow. They might chase after replacement fast, reckless entanglements that serve only to delay the inevitable collapse. They might throw themselves into projects, appearances, anything to avoid sitting alone with the realization that the person they once despised, the person they tried to diminish, was in fact the only real anchor they had, and now that anchor is gone. The spiral begins slowly. Small cracks widen into gaping wounds, rage flares unpredictably, paranoia seeps in, their carefully curated reputation starts to slip further, because without someone stable nearby to regulate their public mask, their true instability begins to show. They make poor decisions, lash out at the wrong people, create unnecessary enemies. The energy it takes to maintain the performance becomes too great. Their lies grow sloppier, their manipulations more obvious, and piece by piece the false world they built around themselves starts to collapse. You are a kind of grace to them, whether they ever understood it or not. Your patience, your truthfulness, your strength were opportunities, chances for them to grow, to face themselves, to change. But when grace is rejected, what follows is often judgment. Not the judgment of a vengeful enemy, but the judgment that reality itself brings when denial can no longer be maintained. In losing you, they lose their last clear path back to what is real, and that loss begins a descent they may never recover from. There is a strange silence that comes after you leave. At first it may feel like freedom to them, no one to challenge them, no one to reflect their failures. But that silence grows heavier with time. It becomes a gnawing, inescapable reminder that the problems were never truly external. They were always within. And without you there to absorb the blame, to shoulder the emotional weight, to stabilize the chaos, they are left to face themselves alone. For many narcissists, this is the beginning of a long, lonely downfall, a decline marked by fractured relationships, dwindling influence, and an increasing sense of alienation from the very people they once effortlessly charmed. Your departure was not just an event, it was a signal, a final warning that the path they are on leads not to glory or fulfillment, but to devastation. And when the dust settles, when the illusions crumble and the applause fades, they are left with the wreckage of everything they refused to confront when they still had the chance.